The rain was pouring outside, the kind of rain that makes you want to stay indoors, wrapped in a blanket with a hot cup of tea. But here I was, standing in the middle of my living room, staring at my sister Laura, who had just stormed into my house uninvited. Her hair was soaked, her mascara running down her cheeks, and her eyes were filled with a mix of anger and desperation. "I need the keys to your house, Emily," Laura demanded, her voice trembling but firm. She stood there, dripping water onto my hardwood floors, her arms crossed as if she had every right to be there. I blinked, trying to process what she had just said. "Excuse me," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions brewing inside me. "This is my house, Laura. I worked hard for this. You can't just walk in here and demand the keys." Laura scoffed, rolling her eyes as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Oh, come on, Emily. You have this big, beautiful house all to yourself, and I'm struggling to keep a roof over my kids' heads. It's not fair. You have 3 bedrooms just sitting empty, and I'm crammed into a tiny apartment with 2 kids. How can you be so selfish?" I felt a surge of anger rise within me, but I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure. "Laura, I'm not being selfish. This is my home. I worked for years to buy this place. I've sacrificed so much. Overtime shifts, living with roommates, saving every penny I could. This house is mine, and I'm not just going to hand it over to you." Laura's face twisted into a scowl, and she turned to her parents, who were sitting awkwardly on the couch, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Mom, Dad, can you believe her? She's being so heartless. I'm her sister, and she's turning her back on me when I need her the most." I watched as my parents exchanged that familiar look, the one that told me they were about to side with Laura, just like they always did. It had been this way since we were kids. Laura, the younger sister, was always the one who needed more help, more attention, more support. And me? Well, my achievements were always seen as reasons why I should help her, rather than something to be celebrated. "Emily," my mom began, her voice soft but with that tone that always made my stomach churn. "Your sister has a point. Family should help family. You're doing so well in your career, and Laura is really struggling right now. Maybe you could let her and the kids stay here for a little while." I felt my jaw tighten. "Mom, I'm doing well because I worked for it. I didn't get handed anything. I took extra shifts, lived with roommates, and saved every penny I could. Laura's struggling because she refuses to hold down a job for more than a few months. That's not my fault." Laura's eyes welled up with tears, and I knew what was coming next. It was her go-to move whenever she didn't get her way. "You have no idea how hard it is to be a single mom," she sobbed. "You're so focused on your career that you don't even care about family." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it aside. "Laura, you're single by choice. You left Tom, remember? He was a good man who supported you through everything, but you decided he wasn't exciting enough and left him for that musician who disappeared 2 months later. Don't put this on me." "Emily Jane Mitchell," my father's stern voice cut through the room, and I turned to face him. "How dare you speak to your sister that way? She's going through a difficult time, and you're sitting here in your big house, all alone, refusing to help family. We didn't raise you to be so heartless." I let out a bitter laugh. "No, you raised me to be Laura's personal safety net. Every time I accomplish something, it becomes a reason why I should give more to her. When I got into college on a scholarship, you told me I should help pay her tuition. When I got my first job, suddenly I was responsible for her car payments. And now that I've bought a house, you expect me to just hand it over to her? No, absolutely not." Laura's tears were flowing freely now, and I knew she was about to play her next card. "I knew it," she said, her voice shaking. "You've always hated my kids. Just because you're too focused on your career to have a family of your own doesn't mean you should punish mine." That hit a nerve. I'd always wanted children, but I'd spent my 20s working overtime and building my career specifically, so I could provide them with stability when the time came. Unlike Laura, who had her first child at 20 with barely a high school diploma to her name. "This discussion is over," I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. "I'm sorry you're struggling, Laura, but my house is not the solution." "Sit down," my father commanded, his voice firm. "We're not finished here." "Yes, we are," I insisted, heading for the door. "It's my house. My name is on the deed. My mortgage. End of story. As I reached for the front door, my father's next words stopped me cold. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your sister, don't bother coming back. You're either part of this family, or you're not. I turned slowly, looking at each of their faces. My father's stern disapproval, my mother's tearful manipulation, Laura's smug certainty that she was about to get her way again. In that moment, something inside me broke, or maybe it finally healed. That's your choice then, I said quietly. Because I'm done being Laura's backup plan. I walked out, ignoring their calls behind me. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Over the next week, the pressure intensified. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls from family members, aunts telling me I was being cruel, cousins saying I should be ashamed, even my grandmother weighing in about how family should come first. What none of them knew was that I'd already helped Laura more times than I could count. When she needed money for her kids' school supplies, I sent it. When her car broke down, I paid for repairs. When she couldn't make rent, I covered it. But it was never enough. She never learned, never changed, never took responsibility. Then came the evening that changed everything. I was at home, enjoying a rare quiet moment on my beloved porch, when a police car pulled up. 2 officers approached, looking uncomfortable. "Miss Mitchell," one of them asked, "we have a report from your parents claiming you've illegally locked them out of their property. They're saying they helped pay for this house and have a right to access it. They're demanding we intervene to let your sister move in." I stared at them in disbelief before letting out a short laugh. "I have all the documentation showing I bought this house entirely on my own. Would you like to see it?" The officers looked relieved when I produced the paperwork. They left with apologies, but the incident shook me. My family was willing to lie to the police to force my hand. The next day, I came home from work to find Laura, my parents, and a locksmith at my front door. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, jumping out of my car. "Being family," my father said firmly. "Since you won't be reasonable, we're taking matters into our own hands. Laura and the kids need this house more than you do." The locksmith flipped between us uncertainly. "Ma'am, they said they were the owners." "I am the owner," I said, pulling out my phone. "And I'm calling the police right now to report an attempted break-in." "You wouldn't dare," my mother gasped. "Watch me." They left before the police arrived, but their parting words haunted me. "You'll regret this," Laura spat. "When you have nobody left, remember it was your choice." I spent that night pacing my house, alternating between rage and heartbreak. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Sarah Chen, and scheduled an urgent meeting. I needed to protect myself because something told me this wasn't over. I was right. 2 days later, I received notice that Laura was suing me for partial ownership of the house, claiming she had contributed to the down payment. It was a complete lie, but she had convinced our parents to testify on her behalf, claiming they had given her money specifically for my house. "They're trying to use the legal system to bully you," Sarah said when I showed her the papers. "But they've made a huge mistake. False testimony is perjury, and we have all the documentation showing exactly where your down payment came from." She was right. I had years of bank statements showing my careful saving, documentation of every overtime shift I'd worked, records of the roommates I'd lived with to cut costs. I had proof that, far from contributing to my house, Laura had actually borrowed money from me multiple times. "We're not just going to defend against this," Sarah said, her eyes gleaming. "We're going to countersue for harassment and legal fees. By the time we're done, they'll wish they'd never tried this." As we prepared our case, I discovered something that made me feel physically ill. Laura had used my parents' retirement savings to fund her lawsuit. She had convinced them to mortgage their house, promising she'd pay them back once she got her fair share of my property. "They're going to lose everything," I realized, sitting in Sarah's office. "Laura is going to destroy their retirement to fuel her entitlement." Sarah looked at me sympathetically. "You could settle. Give her what she wants to protect your parents." I thought about it for a moment. I was tempted. Then I remembered every time they'd enabled Laura's behavior, every time they'd sacrificed my well-being for her demands, every time they'd chosen her comfort over my boundaries. "No," I said firmly. "They made their choice. It's time they faced the consequences." The day of our first court appearance, I walked into the courthouse with my head held high. Laura sat on the other side with our parents, all three of them shooting me dirty looks. None of them knew what was coming. Your Honor, Sarah began, not only do we have evidence disproving every claim made by the plaintiff, but we can prove this lawsuit was filed in bad faith using fraudulently obtained funds. What happened next would change our family forever, but not in the way any of us expected. The courtroom fell silent as Sarah presented piece after piece of evidence. Bank statements showed every penny I'd saved. Pay stubs documented years of overtime shifts. Rental agreements proved how I'd lived with roommates to cut costs. But the real bombshell came when Sarah revealed what Laura had done to fund this lawsuit. Your Honor, Sarah said, her voice steady, we have documentation showing that the plaintiff convinced her parents to take out a second mortgage on their home to fund this frivolous lawsuit. They were led to believe they would be repaid from the proceeds of this case. The judge's expression darkened. Is this true, counsel? She asked Laura's lawyer. Laura's attorney shifted uncomfortably. Your Honor, the source of my client's legal funds isn't relevant to. It becomes relevant, Sarah interrupted, when it demonstrates a pattern of financial manipulation and fraud. We have evidence that Miss Laura Mitchell has a history of exploiting family members for financial gain. I watched as Laura's face shifted from smug to panicked. She hadn't expected this level of scrutiny. Neither had her parents, who sat behind her, looking increasingly uncomfortable as Sarah methodically laid out years of Laura's financial manipulation. Furthermore, Sarah continued, we have proof that the plaintiff lied under oath about contributing to the down payment. These bank records show that, far from contributing, she was actually borrowing money from my client during this period. The judge reviewed the documents, her frown deepening. Miss Mitchell, she addressed Laura directly, are you aware that making false statements under oath constitutes perjury? Laura burst into tears, her usual go-to move when cornered. I just wanted what was fair, she sobbed. My sister has everything, while my children and I struggle. What's fair? I couldn't hold back anymore, standing up despite Sarah's warning hand on my arm. Was it fair when you convinced our parents to risk their retirement? Was it fair when you lied to the police about property ownership? Was it fair when you tried to break into my house? Order, the judge called sharply. Miss Mitchell, please be seated. She turned to Laura. Young lady, I've seen enough. This case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential perjury charges. The aftermath was immediate and explosive. Laura ran from the courtroom in tears, our mother hurrying after her. But my father remained seated, staring at the floor with an expression I'd never seen before, defeat mixed with dawning realization. Outside the courthouse, he approached me slowly. Emily, he began, his voice rough. I didn't know about the second mortgage. Laura said she had investors. Of course she did, I replied tiredly. She always has a story, Dad. And you and Mom always believe her. We're going to lose our house, he said quietly. The proud man who had threatened to disown me weeks ago now looked old and broken. Your mother doesn't know yet. I don't know how to tell her. Part of me wanted to walk away, to let them face the consequences of their choices. But another part remembered the father who had taught me to ride a bike, who had worked double shifts to put braces on my teeth, who had been a good dad before Laura's manipulation consumed our family. I'll help you figure something out, I found myself saying. But things have to change. This can't keep happening. He nodded slowly. I know. I'm sorry, Emily. We've been so wrong. Over the next few weeks, the full extent of Laura's financial manipulation came to light. She hadn't just convinced our parents to mortgage their house, she had opened credit cards in their names, taken out loans they knew nothing about. They were drowning in debt that would take years to pay off. Laura disappeared after the court case, leaving them to deal with the aftermath. Her kids stayed with their father, Tom, who had been trying to get custody for months due to her instability. I worked with my parents and a financial advisor to create a debt repayment plan. It meant they would have to sell their house, but I helped them find a comfortable apartment they could afford on their retirement income. It wasn't easy, but for the first time, they were facing reality instead of enabling Laura's schemes. We failed you both, my mother said one evening as we sorted through their belongings for the move. We thought we were helping Laura, but we were just making everything worse. And we hurt you in the process. Yes, you did, I agreed, not softening the truth. But we can build something better from here, if you're willing to set real boundaries. 3 months after the court case, Laura finally called. But it wasn't the tearful apology I might have expected. Instead, she was angry, blaming me for destroying our family. "You've ruined everything," she screamed through the phone. "Mom and Dad lost their house because of you. My kids are living with Tom because of you." "No, Laura," I said calmly. "Everything that's happened is because of your choices. I just stopped letting you make your problems everyone else's responsibility." "I'm filing for bankruptcy," she spat. "I hope you're happy knowing you did this to your own sister." I took a deep breath. "Goodbye, Laura. Get help." I hung up and blocked her number. It hurt, but it was necessary. Sometimes, love means letting people face the consequences of their actions, even when those people are family. That evening, sitting on my porch, the same porch they had tried to take from me, I felt a strange mix of sadness and peace. My family would never be the same, but maybe that was okay. Sometimes, relationships need to break completely before they can be rebuilt into something healthier. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom, Laura's ex-husband. "Thank you for standing up to her. The kids are doing better with stability. You're welcome to visit them anytime." I smiled, thinking about my niece and nephew. Maybe this was the beginning of a different kind of family, one built on respect and boundaries instead of manipulation and guilt. The story wasn't over, but for the first time in years, I felt hopeful about where it might lead. 6 months after the court case, I was having Sunday dinner with my parents in their new apartment when the call came. Laura's name flashed on my mom's phone screen, and I watched the familiar tension settle over her face. "Put it on speaker," I said quietly. "We need to handle this together." My mother hesitated, then nodded and answered the call. Laura's voice filled the room, but something was different. Instead of her usual angry accusations or manipulative tears, she sounded desperate. "Mom, I need help," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm being evicted. They're giving me 48 hours to get out. I know I messed up, but I have nowhere to go." I watched my parents exchange glances. This was the moment of truth. Would they fall back into old patterns, or maintain the boundaries we'd worked so hard to establish? My father cleared his throat. "Laura, where have you been for the past 6 months?" I was trying to figure things out," she stammered. "I was angry and hurt, but I've changed. I promise. I've changed." "Like you promised to pay back the money for the lawsuit?" my mother asked, her voice firmer than I'd ever heard it. "Like you promised to repay the credit cards you opened in our names?" There was a long pause. "I know I've made mistakes," Laura finally said. "But I'm your daughter. You can't just let me be homeless." I held my breath, waiting. This was the moment Laura had always won in the past, using guilt and family obligation to get her way. But something had shifted in our family dynamic. "You're right," my father said. "You are our daughter, and we love you. But we can't give you money or a place to stay. We can help you find resources, shelters, job training programs, counseling. But we won't enable destructive behavior anymore." "Is Emily there?" Laura's voice turned bitter. "Is she the one turning you against me? She has that big house all to herself while her own sister faces homelessness." "Stop," my mother cut in. "Emily isn't turning anyone against you. Your choices did that. We're offering real help, Laura. Will you take it?" The line went dead. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. My mother wiped away tears, but they weren't the manipulated tears of the past. They were the honest tears of a parent finally facing reality. "Did we do the right thing?" she whispered. "Yes," I said firmly. Sometimes, love means being strong enough to let people face consequences. The next few days were tense. Laura tried everything, calling other family members, posting dramatic social media updates about family betrayal, even showing up at my parents' apartment in tears. But something had fundamentally changed. The more she pushed, the more resolved we became. I helped my parents find resources for Laura, contact information for legitimate housing assistance programs, job training opportunities, even a counselor who specialized in financial trauma. We compiled it all in an email and sent it to her. Her response was a single line: "I don't need your charity. I need my family." "She still doesn't get it," my father said, reading the response. "This is us being family. Real family helps you grow, not destroy yourself. 2 weeks later, I was working in my garden when a familiar car pulled into my driveway. It was Tom, with my niece and nephew in the back seat. The kids bounded out, running to hug me, while Tom approached more slowly. "Hope you don't mind us stopping by," he said. The kids missed their aunt. As I played with the children, Tom filled me in on the latest developments. Laura had shown up at his house after the eviction, expecting to move in. When he refused, she threatened to fight for full custody again. But something interesting happened. "Tom," I said when we got to court, "she didn't show. Her lawyer said she'd taken a job in another state. Just left without even saying goodbye to the kids." I looked at my niece and nephew, happily playing on the swing set I'd installed for their visits. They seemed more relaxed, more childlike than they had in years. "They need stability," Tom continued. "And, well, we were hoping you might want to be more involved in their lives. You're the only stable family they have on their mother's side." Tears pricked my eyes as I watched the children play. I'd love that. That evening, after Tom and the kids left, I sat on my porch, reflecting on how much had changed. The house that Laura had tried to take from me had become a safe haven for her children instead. The family she tried to manipulate had grown stronger by standing together against manipulation. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I hope you're happy with yourself. You've destroyed everything. Laura." New number, same tactics. I typed out a response, then deleted it. Some messages don't need answers. Instead, I pulled up my photos from that afternoon. My niece proudly showing me her school art project, my nephew teaching me his new video game. I sent these to my parents with a simple message: "Thank you for choosing truth over comfort. Look what we're building." The response came quickly: "No, thank you for showing us the way." As the sun set over my garden, I thought about the word family. Laura had always wielded it like a weapon, using it to demand and manipulate. But real family, I was learning, was something entirely different. It was my parents working hard to rebuild trust. It was Tom making sure his kids maintained healthy connections. It was boundaries and honesty and sometimes difficult choices. I heard the distant sound of children laughing from the neighbor's yard and smiled, thinking about my next weekend with my niece and nephew. We were planning to plant a vegetable garden together, teaching them about nurturing growth and patience. It felt like a metaphor for our whole family journey. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building something beautiful from the ashes of what was destroyed. 1 year after the case that changed everything, I hosted a family barbecue in my backyard. The garden my niece and nephew had helped plant was flourishing, with tomatoes and cucumbers ripening on the vines. My parents were chatting with Tom by the grill, looking more relaxed than I'd seen them in years. That's when my phone buzzed with a familiar area code, Laura's new number. "I heard from your sister," my mother said quietly, appearing beside me. "She's back in town." I nodded, showing her the number on my screen. "She wants to meet. Says she's changed." My mother's face reflected the complex emotions we all felt: hope, fear, skepticism. "What are you going to do?" I looked around my yard at the life we'd built from the ashes of Laura's destruction. "I'm going to meet her. Not here. At a coffee shop. But this time, I'm setting the terms." The next day, I sat in a quiet cafe, watching Laura walk through the door. She looked different, older, more worn, but also somehow more substantial. Gone was the flashy jewelry and designer clothes she used to prioritize over rent. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. No dramatic entrance, no tears. That alone was new. "Why are you back?" I asked directly. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, a gesture that reminded me of our mother. "I hit rock bottom," she said simply. "Lost everything. Ended up in a shelter in Michigan. They had this program: therapy, job training, financial counseling. I finally had to look at myself. Really look." I stayed quiet, waiting. "I was so angry at you," she continued, "for having what I wanted. But you didn't have it handed to you. You built it. While I was looking for shortcuts and handouts, you were working and saving and doing things right." "It's not about right or wrong, Laura," I said. "It's about choices and consequences." She nodded slowly. "I know. That's actually why I'm back. I want to make amends. Real ones. Not just saying sorry to get something. I'm not asking to move in or borrow money. I just want a chance to rebuild relationships, especially with my kids. I studied her face, searching for the manipulation I'd grown so used to seeing. Instead, I saw something unfamiliar: accountability. The kids are thriving with Tom, I said carefully. We won't disrupt that. I know, she replied, and the lack of argument was telling. I've talked to Tom. We're looking at supervised visits, family counseling. I want to earn my way back into their lives, not demand it. Over the next hour, Laura shared her journey, the rock bottom that became a foundation, the hard work of facing herself, the slow process of rebuilding from scratch. She had a steady job now, a small apartment, and a therapist she spoke with weekly. I'm not asking for trust, she said as we finished our coffee. I know that has to be earned. I just want a chance to try. I thought carefully before responding. I can't speak for everyone else, but I'm willing to watch and wait. Show us who you're becoming through actions, not promises. The months that followed tested everyone's commitment to change. Laura started with supervised visits with her children, never missing a session, never arguing about the limitations. She found a job and kept it, living within her means for the first time in her life. She attended family counseling with our parents, facing the damage she caused with painful honesty. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns tried to reassert themselves, times when the pull of easy solutions tempted her. But each time, she caught herself and did the hard work instead. One evening, as I watched her helping my niece with homework on my porch, the same porch she once tried to claim as her own, I realized something profound. The house I fought so hard to protect had become more than just property. It was a symbol of our family's transformation. You know what's funny? Laura said later as she was leaving. I used to be so jealous of this house. Now, I'm grateful you didn't let me take it. If you had, I might never have faced myself. I thought about the long road we'd traveled. The pain, the growth, the rebuilding of trust, one small choice at a time. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to find what really matters. She smiled, a real smile, without manipulation or agenda. I'm glad we didn't lose each other for good. As I watched her drive away, I felt a deep sense of peace. The sister who had once tried to take everything from me was finally finding her own path. Our family, once fractured by manipulation and enablement, was healing through honesty and boundaries. I walked through my house, my hard-earned, fiercely protected home, and realized it had served its purpose. Not just as shelter, but as a line in the sand, a catalyst for change, a symbol of what's possible when we choose growth over easy answers. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most meaningful victories. And sometimes, the things we fight to keep end up keeping us in return.